But I also wanted to dispel the belief that mass timber is more expensive than other forms of construction. So we looked for the sweet spot in mass timber and we optimized a structural solution that was designed with our manufacturing capability in mind. So we were able to drive down the cost of our buildings. And when we did our first affordable housing solution, we went up against the stick frame guys, the precast concrete guys, the volumetric modular manufacturers as well. And we won our first project based on price alone. And we have since won another 7 or 8 affordable housing projects. And we now won every project based on price.
This is the Mass Timber Group Show. I'm Nick.
And I'm Brady, and we talk to sustainable building experts. Today we caught up with Patrick Chouinard, the founder of Element5, arguably the most innovative mass timber producer in North America. Patrick and his team are smashing mass timber misconceptions with their innovative and repeatable systems.
Be on the lookout for their brand new glulam facility being built right now. The new addition will double their mass timber capacity when complete and continue their impressive growth trajectory.
But before we jump in, we're helping AEC professionals learn to build with mass timber so that they can change the world with their projects at the next Mass Timber Group Summit taking place in Denver. Save your seat by clicking the link in the show notes below. So with that, let's get into it.
Well, I worked in the log home industry for about 5 years, and I saw that the log home industry had a great business model. Much of the work that they do is prefabricated. The log home company that I work for, I'm focused on just manufacturing the logs, but they provided a fully integrated weather-tight shell package for their buildings, which included the logs, the windows, the doors, the soffit, the fascia, the shingles, the whole kit. And I thought that was a great business opportunity, but in the log home industry, the market is quite limited. It's limited only to single-family homes that are sold in rural environments. And as a sales rep, I was looking for a greater opportunity. And then I discovered CLT in Europe. And then I realized that I could take the log home business model and not only do prefabricated structures out of wood in rural environments, but I could start to build much larger buildings in urban settings. And that was an opportunity that I identified probably about 13 years ago. And everything that Element5 is today is the realization of that dream that started many, many years ago.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of people in the mass timber world have some sort of wood background, whether that comes from timber, forestry, logging, and in your case, log homes. When you first got into the mass timber industry, what did you notice that was extremely different from what you were expecting?
Good question. Well, when I started in the mass timber industry, it was in such infancy that there were very few architects or engineers or general contractors that knew how to work with mass timber. There were challenges on the supply side that, in Canada, because we're a large producer of wooden materials, I thought, oh, this will be a breeze. I'll be able to source these materials from Canada for, to be able to make CLT, but that wasn't the case. The whole industry is geared towards a certain type of product, dimensional material largely. And there were some challenges that I experienced on the supply chain that the side of the business had made it very difficult to start manufacturing mass timber. We had to invest millions of dollars in kilns to be able to kiln dry the material down to the right moisture content. Because we can make a 53-foot long panel, we needed lumber that was in those lengths. So there were no finger joiners out there that could produce lumber in those lengths. So we had to invest in finger joining equipment to be able to make that kind of lumber. We had to invest in planers, for example, to be able to plane the material down to the right thickness. So there was some huge challenges. And I didn't realize when I started, the objective was to build a manufacturing plant, but in order to do that, we had to also provide the services. We needed to handhold projects from the very early stage. We had to become our own architects and our own engineers and our own designers and detailers and our own general contractors and our own assembly experts just to be able to um, take the project to a point where we could actually manufacture anything. So there was huge challenges that I didn't foresee when I first started this industry and sort of learned the hard way.
So let me get this right. So you had to start a multi-million dollar manufacturing plant from the ground up. You had to deal with all the supply chain challenges that have it. And then you had to start a consulting business for architects, engineers, hardware connection, fabrication, install, delivery. All of those services you had to be knowledgeable on and have a team that could speak to them just to get started with your plant.
Pretty much. And the challenges
Well,
beyond that too.
and then speaking of one of those challenges, there's I'll call it a stigma in the mass timber world that mass timber is always a premium. It always costs more. It's always more expensive than cast and plate concrete and steel or definitely light frame. But you guys are doing something a little different and you guys have kind of blown that misconception out of the water. Can you tell us what you guys are doing with affordable housing?
Sure. Yeah. So that I'd say historically has been the case when raw materials needed to be shipped long distances. When I started out, we weren't a manufacturer. I used to represent a European manufacturer and bring materials in long distances. And because of the shipping costs, it made mass timber more expensive. However, we now source all of our materials locally. We manufacture in a high-tech manufacturing facility locally, and we sell most of our projects locally. So we're shipping them shorter distances. And so because of that, we've been able to drive down the cost of mass timber projects.
Hey, we're going to get back to the podcast in just a second. But first, I have a question for you. Are you somebody looking to build a mass timber project? If the answer is yes, then you need to put together an experienced team.
Our partners at Cornerstone Timber Frames are leaders in heavy timber construction and have 30 plus years of experience, which means you can trust them to get the job done right.
They collaborate with Nordic Structures to bring you the highest quality FSC certified mass timber available. They also have some of the most advanced fabrication technology in the industry, so your project goes up smoothly without costly on-site modification or delays.
That means they have the experience, network, and technology to make your next mass timber project a success. Learn more about Cornerstone Timber Frames by clicking the link in the show notes below.
We have had some success in the affordable housing space over the last 3 years. One of the reasons why I took on affordable housing is one, because there's a huge need for affordable housing in the marketplace. But I also wanted to dispel the belief that mass timber is more expensive than other forms of construction. So mass timber can be more expensive if you're not designing and engineering your building as a mass timber building from the very beginning. So in order to take advantage of the benefits of mass timber, you really need to design your building as a mass timber building from the beginning. So what we did is we looked for the sweet spot in mass timber. And I think although we sell into, a huge range of industries and building typologies, I think there's a huge opportunity in sort of that mid-rise sector of the marketplace, that missing middle sector of the marketplace. So we identified that as a sweet spot. And then what we did is I got together with an architect friend and we optimized a structural solution that was designed with our manufacturing capability in mind. So they're reducing the waste in our panels. We're facilitating the speed with which we're able to assemble our buildings. And through that sort of innovative approach to design, we were able to drive down the cost of our buildings. And when we did our first affordable housing solution, we went up against the stick frame guys, the precast concrete guys, the volumetric, modular manufacturers as well. And we won our first project based on price alone. And we have since won another 7 or 8 affordable housing projects, and we now won every project based on price.
Every single one of those. And is it the exact same model that you have that you're able to recreate that, and that's where the savings comes into play?
It's a similar model. We've developed this structural solution, which is optimized for mass timber, and again, optimized for manufacturing efficiency. But there's a fair degree of flexibility that's been designed into it. Ideally, the grid pattern remains relatively the same, but you can still change the size of the footprint. You can change the number of floors of the building. You can design it as studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms, and beyond. But within certain confines of the structural model, you can adapt it to a variety of needs. And so every affordable housing project that we've done has been a repeat of the same sort of structural model, but adapted to the unique requirements. But the thinking there is you architect the building once, you engineer it to a large degree once, you use the same materials, you use the same connections. So the next building, rather than starting from scratch, you're able to leverage all of that investment that you made in the first project, and then just sort of replicate it and adapt it over and over and over again. And so that's proven to be a very effective model for us, and the future of what we're attempting to do in the affordable housing space.
How much of the speed of installation and reduced on-site labor contributes to those cost savings?
I would say that the biggest advantage of the solution we offer is, in fact, the speed with which we're able to assemble these buildings. From the cost perspective, I can say honestly that we're competitive in the marketplace. We've been able to prove that mass timber is a very competitive solution in the affordable housing space. I wouldn't say that there are huge cost savings um, really in our solution, although you know, again, we want it based on price. The main advantage is the speed with which we're able to assemble our building. So it's like IKEA furniture. Essentially, you're not constructing buildings on site like you do traditional construction materials. You're simply assembling them. And when we designed the first affordable housing building, it was for the YWCA in Kitchener, Ontario. Here, it is a 23,000 square foot building, has 41 units and 4 stories. Um, we even surprised ourselves and the rest of the industry when we assembled that entire structure in only 20 days. I'm not talking about the whole building. I'm just talking about the, 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 the structure of that building. So we're able to achieve, I'd say conservatively, in the 20 to 25% schedule savings with this structural solution that we've made available.
And it's interesting. I see now that there's a YWCA building number two. So it sounds like the first one went so well that you just replicated it and the same business model works.
That's right. Yeah. So the first building was one bedroom apartments for single women that were at risk of homelessness. Um, the YWCA liked the first building so much they decided to build a second building on the same site. However, they had different needs. The needs for the second building was for women with children. So we designed it as two-bedroom units, a smaller footprint, only 3 stories versus 4 stories. So again, it shows the adaptability of the structural model to unique requirements. But yeah, it's again, they liked it so much they wanted to build another similar building. And when you speak to the people who live in those buildings, they absolutely love being in those buildings. When you're in a mass timber building, there's a different feel to those buildings than what you get in a traditional concrete or steel building. So it's a very warm, healthy, comforting, and feels like a very secure environment. So I think, for those reasons, and others, they decided to build a second building.
And you had mentioned the health of the building and like how people feel in there. So we interviewed Ty Farrow, and I think you've worked with him on some projects. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
Yes.
that entire there's science behind it. It's not just you walk in and some people say it's woo woo. You feel better around wood, but no, there's
Yeah.
actually like changes that are happening in your mind, in your brain, to
Yeah.
support that.
Well, you've spoken to the right guy. Ty Farrow is probably one of the industry's leading experts on biophilic design. In fact, we worked together with Ty Farrow to take the structural model that we developed for affordable housing and adapt it to retirement living. So he was the major driver in trying to create these healthier environments for retirees. So, but there's been a number of studies that scientifically look at the health benefits of exposing occupants to natural elements like wood. And it's true for living environments, office environments, environments for, for schools and for children. And I think as humans, there's just a natural connection between us and natural elements like wood. And hard to explain. There's the empirical data that supports that, but you really appreciate it when you're in a mass timber building and you experience it firsthand.
And you have some pretty exciting goals out on the horizon. It sounds like that you're expanding, and I would love to talk a little bit more about what your new plan is going to produce, and your specialty, and then, but also, like, you kind of you sit out there in Toronto, which is in the Great Lakes area. Just would you say that there's like a 50% go to Canada, 50% of your, projects go to the US, or is that a little bit more, like 60/40, or, 70/30?
Yeah. So, mass timber really took off in Canada about 15 years ago. Of course, it started in Europe 35 years ago or more, and it landed on the shores of British Columbia maybe 15 years ago. And mass timber has made its way across Canada, and it's now used from coast to coast. So the majority of the mass timber opportunities were in the Canadian marketplace, but what we're seeing is huge adoption in the US marketplace, to the point where if it hasn't happened already, it'll happen in 2024, where the number of opportunities in the market will or already have surpassed the opportunities in the Canadian market. So for us, it's probably on the verge of converting from 50/50 of percent of our business, between Canada and the US, to now sort of 60% US and 40% Canada. And we see that expanding for us in a big way. We're in the fortunate situation of our geographic location where there's the dip in the Great Lakes. We see huge growth in the eastern half of North America. Um, and we're in a position to be able to sell right into the central part of the United States and the whole eastern seaboard. And we're seeing a huge uptake in mass timber in Michigan. Michigan's been a huge supporter of mass timber, so we probably have 7 or 8 projects in Michigan right now. We're selling into the Boston area, into New York, and just the sheer size of the U.S. market, it's very rapidly going to overtake the size of the Canadian one.
Is that primarily due from just population and, different opportunities as far as like economic reasons, or is there something happening in the mass timber industry itself that's kind of driving those differences?
Well, I think population plays a big role in it. That simply the size of the U.S. marketplace versus the Canadian marketplace or the European marketplace. And so I think that's a big part of it. We're seeing code change that is allowing for taller and taller buildings all the time. So it means, you know, more building opportunities for us to sell mass timber into. And, I think it's taken a while for the US market to see the advantage of mass timber. So the advantages are really being able to build buildings faster, cheaper, and create these wonderful, healthy environments for people, and healthy for the environment. And I think the U.S. market has recognized all of those benefits. And there's been a number of companies like U.S. Woodworks, for example, that have been promoting mass timber in a big way. There's been some big conferences, in Portland, the Mass Timber Conference, what was previously IWBC on the East Coast. And with all of that messaging, the U.S. is starting to take mass timber up in a big way, and simply because the sheer size of the U.S. market, the sort of ubiquitous nature of the U.S. market, that unquestionably there's going to be huge growth in that sector.
No doubt. And I see a lot of trends lately on projects that are being announced and shared, and they seem to fall into like some very specific use types. So you've got airports seem to be like a huge headline maker, but then also education facilities, K-12, but also higher ed. And that's something that you guys, and you personally have a passion and focus in. Can you tell us why that use type is adopting mass timber more rapidly than others?
Well, good initial point about mass timber usage. So mass timber makes sense for a lot of building typologies, and we started out with even single family housing, and it makes sense for so many building typologies and so many industry segments. There are, I think, sweet spots for mass timber. We're less so into the single family housing market because it's hard for us to compete with the light wood frame industry in that single family housing market. Um, we didn't really see the industrial sector as being one where mass timber made a lot of sense. Like it's where you can build or buy a off the shelf steel building, in large industrial plants, it seemed to make sense. One of the largest projects we won recently is in fact an industrial building that's all mass timber. So even that sector seems to be opening up for us. But I'm particularly interested in the education sector. If you look at what's happening in the European market, for a number of years, mass timber has been used to create schools for kids. It makes so much sense to use mass timber for schools because one, you're creating healthier environments for kids because of the biophilic, benefits of mass timber, but it also provides you more cost predictability when you're building a school in a plant. It provides you more schedule predictability, more cost predictability. So those are things that are really important to the buildings of schools. And we started to see mass timber schools being designed and built in Western Canada and British Columbia and sort of in the Seattle area. But I'm particularly interested in that sector because it's just a wonderful way of creating these healthier environments for kids. So uh, it's starting to happen in the Ontario marketplace. We've been working with the Toronto District School Board, who decided to build their first mass timber school in the province of Ontario. And like we've done in the affordable housing space, we're trying to design, engineer, and optimize the quintessential school for children. Again, that's adaptable, that we can do over and over and over again, so we can produce volumes of these schools across Canada and the United States. And surprisingly, maybe no surprise that we're seeing lots of progress in schools in the U.S. market. And my colleague, who had previously been, driving schools in the U.S., has closed a number of projects in the Michigan market for us for several schools. So very happy to see that that sector of the marketplace is really poised to take off for us, and it's a great opportunity to build some healthier schools for kids.
Another very cool project that I saw was announced recently at least I saw it, was the Colorado School of Mines in Golden, Colorado. The new, it's like $151 million, renovation development complex. There's like 5 new mass timber, like glulam CLT roofs that are going to be like 5 new apartments, like over 1,000 beds. It's a really cool looking development.
Yeah, I think as this industry matures, we're going to see larger and larger projects like that. We're seeing small cities in Europe, for example, that are building exclusively with mass timber. So as this industry evolves, we're going to see larger and larger projects like that become a reality. So, yeah, we very happy to see projects like that take off in the U.S. Very happy as Canadians to be able to participate in those projects, and that project, I think, is reflective of future projects in the U.S. as well.
Yeah. You talked about there's a lot of opportunity for that, the residential side of things. Do you have any like rough estimates or prices of what the difference of cost was compared to traditional? Are you kind of squeaking in almost like neck and neck with with traditional, or is there a significant price decrease? And then also, do you have to, build, let's say, 10 units, or does it more need to be like 20 to 25 to 30 before it kind of makes a little bit more sense on a investment standpoint and like the return on the.
Yeah. So again, where we're seeing the sweet spot for mass timber, particularly what my area of focus is in affordable housing, is in the mid-rise sector of the marketplace, what we refer to as the missing middle sector of the marketplace. Like the the lower end of the marketplace is really well served. Like single family housing is really well served by the stick frame industry. Taller buildings, the 12 stories and beyond is well served by the concrete and steel industries. But there's that sector in the marketplace that's in the middle that is really well served by the mass timber industry. Where we're seeing the greatest need for mass timber is in housing. Is virtually every city in North America is struggling with an affordable housing crisis. So the largest opportunity that I see is to provide multi-unit residential buildings in that mid-rise sector of the marketplace. Very difficult to address the price comparative issue because so much varies depending on geography. Whether you're building in a rural environment, a city environment, whether it's a unionized labor, non-unionized labor. The labor rates in Denver, for example, are different than the labor rates here. So it's very difficult to generalize on a cost per square foot. But again, what I can tell you is that with the structural solution we put together in the affordable housing space, in every case, we go up against the usual contenders, the stick frame guys, precast concrete guys, the volumetric modular guys. And in every case, we won based on price. So I don't think that's going to differ regardless of where we're likely to bid these, whether it's Michigan or, whether it's Ontario or Massachusetts. Um, so our price remains the same. Like our portion of every project is really just the structure of the project. So that's the part that we understand very well. And our price is the same regardless of where the project is. So that is much more sort of manageable. In every project, we are a member of a consortium, and we typically work for the general contractor, as does every other consulting member on that team. So we don't often see the total price of a project. So we don't often get exposed to what the total cost of the project is. So it's hard for us to know really what they come in. All I can tell you is that we've proven to be cost competitive. And I am very confident that any opportunity that we identify to be competitive, that give us an opportunity to price our project, maybe to put a team together that collectively bid those projects. And I'm quite confident that we'll be competitive.
Yeah, I think that from folks that are outside looking into the mass timber industry, cost is always at the front of everybody's mind. Like, is it more expensive? Like, why would I pay a premium for this? Especially if they have to justify it back to their investors. You can get into the other benefits outside of cost, but in the end, somebody's got to pay for it. So that's from the outside looking in. From the inside looking out, what do you see as the biggest challenges to the mass timber industry right now? Like, what are the obstacles that you are facing, that you and the other manufacturers, the practitioners of the trade, that you think that we need to improve on moving forward?
Well, there's many obstacles, as I sort of alluded to at the very beginning, when you're sort of changing the way buildings are being designed, engineered, and brought to market, being manufactured in factories versus on site. There's some huge challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges is just the natural human resistance to change. So it's difficult to change the way owners and developers are designing and developing buildings today. So it's overcoming that inertia in the marketplace is the biggest challenge. But um, other things, like there aren't a lot of architects and engineers that know how to design buildings this way. There's a lack of people who know how to assemble buildings. Um, there's some code challenges. Like code varies in every single state as it does in every single province here. So code changes that allow taller buildings to be built is another challenge. But having said that, despite all of the challenges that we have faced or our industry has faced, mass timber's been taken up in a huge way. I honestly don't think that the industry could move any faster than it's moving right now. I don't know that there's enough capacity in the industry right now to see much more dramatic increases in the demand for mass timber. I mean, it takes a lot of effort and investment to build manufacturing plants, but everything is flowing kind of in a very natural way right now. And I think as the industry matures, we're going to see more mass timber manufacturers. We're going to see more adoption. We're going to see more consultants with the knowledge and experience. We're going to see more complementary other producers that offer more prefabrication in the industry. So yes, there's many challenges. I don't know that there's much more that we can do now in order to change the industry. It just seems to be flowing naturally. So but I can tell you for sure that it's happening in a big way, not only here in Canada, but in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all anybody needs to do is get on LinkedIn and see all the project announcements that seem to happen almost every day now. For sure every week, but it almost feels like I see a new project come across my screen every time I log in. You said two things that stuck out to me. First was you were talking about changing the inertia from the developer owner's perspective. And then two, you talked about the AEC professionals, there not being a huge number of them that know how to work with mass timber. How do you think that you influence those two things? Like if you could tackle both of those challenges right now, how would you change or get in front of developer owners? And then how would you introduce more AEC professionals into the mass timber world?
Well, part of the challenge in the mass timber industry is we're not just capitalizing on an existing opportunity in the marketplace. Part of the challenge is we have to educate the marketplace, and we've been doing that, since we began back in 2015, as has been the case with everybody that's in our industry doing the same thing. So I think it's just a matter of education. What we're finding is that it's difficult to get an owner developer to take that next step and to build their first project. But what we've been able to do with those organizations is sort of provide them enough data and information to convince them that they can make a higher return on investment from a development project in mass timber. So we've been able to convince them to make that investment. And at the same time, because we are consortium based and we've now built relationships with a broad range of industry consultants and contractors and install partners that know how to design, engineer, and consult in mass timbers, we're able to bring an entourage of people to those projects to facilitate how quickly we can take a developer's project to market. So I think that makes it a lot easier for a developer. And our experience is showing that once a developer chooses to go down the mass timber path, that they like it so much that they see the opportunity, they've had the experience, they just want to do, the next project and the next project. So it's a matter of convincing them to take the plunge, so to speak, and then supporting them in that endeavor going forward. So um, that's kind of how we're approaching the developer community. Um, on the ABC side, it just seems to be happening naturally in the industry. One of the things that I think is really missing is college and education programs that teach architects, engineers, and other people how to design in mass timber. Mass timber tends to be only a small portion of their curriculum. So there's a huge need for that in the industry. Um, Regardless, I think, here in Ontario, Ontario's taken up mass timber in a big way. There's probably 25 major mass timber projects that are currently in design, development, or construction in the market as we speak. And I think the ABC folks have just recognized the opportunity in the industry. They also see it as a way of making a positive contribution to the environment by building, with more natural, renewable, sustainably harvested materials. And so there's just this natural desire to want to get involved in it. And despite the lack of education, they've just taken the initiative because they like what they see and they want to get more involved. So it all just seems to be happening naturally in the industry. I don't know that there's much more that we can do, but certainly having more college and university programs that focus on mass timber is something that's definitely needed. And I think um, you know training the next generation of architects and engineers in mass timber is something that the industry needs to do.
About how many projects will you produce a year? And is it on like an uphill scope? Like it's if you have X amount of projects you did in 2023, are you looking to do 10% next year? Are you kind of like at a status quo that like your production only allows a certain amount, so that certain amount, sets you out like one or how far out do you work on your projects?
Yeah, it's a good question. Certainly, production capacity is limited. We can only produce so many projects per year. So at the moment, we can produce about 50,000 cubic meters of mass timber, whether it be CLT or glulam. Um, so I can tell you that us as an organization, we're growing at a rate of approximately 50% per year. When I started 5 years ago, 7 years ago, when I started the company back in 2015, I had about 6 employees. We're now up to about 130 employees in a short period of time. And we've been growing at a rate of about 50% per year. We are, at the moment, we have a large facility in St. Thomas, Ontario right now. It's about 140,000 square feet. Have already broken ground on the adjacent property next to us to build even a larger facility. So our St. Thomas facility has been up and running now for about 3 years. And within 3 years, we've already outgrown that facility. We had to take over about 40,000 square feet at rental properties across the street from us. But now we're building a much larger facility. And we produce both CLT and glulam, but our glulam capacity currently is quite limited. As we get into larger and larger projects, we're unable to produce the size of the members that we need to be able to sell into those projects. And at the moment, for those larger members, we've been buying them from the industry and importing them from Europe. But now we are building a much larger facility with a focus on implementing a much larger, highly automated glulam manufacturing line so that we can start to produce those members. So that will double our capacity. So within about 2 years or less, maybe 18 months to 2 years, we will have doubled our capacity in master components.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive growth. I think, did you say 50% year over year growth?
50%, yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And to be running a team of over 100 in, just a few short years is also wildly impressive. So with this dramatic growth, the new plant, an expanding team, like what's the company's main goal moving forward? Are you guys focused on a certain building typology? Do you have certain goals that you want to hit personally?
Another good question. And part of that is tied to my own personal goals. For much of our history, every project that we have done has been a custom one-off project. And as you can imagine, there's a huge investment in time and resources to be able to support those projects, to handhold those projects from very early stage through to something that we can actually manufacture. We don't make a lot of money on the service side of our component. It's almost something like a necessary evil. We need to provide those services simply for us to have something that we can manufacture. Um, so up until about 3 years ago, 100% of the projects we did were custom one-off projects. The future of our industry is where I personally want to see us go, and that is to more from 100% custom work to maybe 60 to 70% custom work. I think custom work will always be the major component of what we do, but to provide 30 to maybe 40% of our production in repeatable solutions, much like what we're doing in the affordable housing space, where we've created this optimized off the shelf kit of parts that we can do over and over again. We believe that the key to profitability is not to do more of the same kinds of custom projects, but to start to do the same types of buildings over and over again. And we get very, very efficient at it. So we make money by lowering our cost structure and start to produce those buildings much more effectively and efficiently. So um, we started off with the affordable housing space. That sweet spot for us extends to market rate housing, to student residences, to senior living. And so as we expand that replicability model, we'll focus on those other 4 or 5 sectors of the marketplace and to prove the model, prove that we can do that effectively. But then there are dozens and dozens of building typologies where we'll see that replicability. For example, we have a contract for a local retail branch of a bank. And so we have optimized this structural solution for that bank. But that bank wants to use that same structural solution across the country. So we'll see one of those projects, then we'll see 5, then we'll see 20. And then all of a sudden we're producing the same sorts of branches over a large geography. So we see there being dozens and dozens of building typologies where that is possible. So as we move forward as an organization, we will morph from 100% customization to a much higher percentage of our business being these replicable solutions.
And how far out did you say that your work file is, or your purchase orders?
Um, we have a very positive contract base for 2024. If everything goes according to schedule, which is never the case, if everything goes according to schedule, then we will have hit our revenue target for 2024. But as is always the case, projects go left and right for reasons totally beyond our control. So we have capacity to take on more projects in 2024. But we have a healthy pipeline, and we have a healthy number of contracts that we've already closed for the current year.
Good to hear. Yeah, I was talking to Lee about that. He was pretty excited about what's to come. But well, that's really good to hear. We're excited to see what happens with your new glue lam facility. That's going to be pretty cutting edge. Before we ask our last question, where can people find you or connect with you or in your organization?
Okay, well, my email address is Patrick at Element5. That's the word 5, Five, .co. And our website, element5.co. Again, that's the word 5, not the number 5.
Okay. If you had a magic wand and you could change anything about your industry, what would you change and why?
Good question. Well, as I say, things are going really well in the industry. I don't know that there's a lot we really need to or can change at the moment. Not so much an industry challenge, but a human challenge, and that is the natural human element for and reluctance to change. I think, as humans, we want to feel comfortable, and we do that by continuing to do the things that we're comfortable doing. So, but I think that's a limitation on innovation and creativity. I think the mass timber industry is really starved for creativity and innovation at the moment. We're really at the infancy of what the industry can become. And there's a huge need for opportunity for complementary engineered wood products that are out there. So I would say we need to create an environment of innovation and creativity in order really to capitalize on the opportunity that's out there and to create products that allow mass timber to be able to sold into different environments, to different building typologies. For example, products that allow us to get more into the industrial space that has been dominated by the steel industry for so long. So something that stimulates innovation and creativity is what I think is necessary, in our space.
Well, Patrick, we've had a great time talking with you. We're super excited to see where you take Element5 over the next 5 years with plans for expanding your facility. You're growing so fast. Your team is absolutely wonderful. We've worked with a couple of them so far, and we're very excited to partner with you on the upcoming summit down in Denver in August. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you around.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Cheers.